back to the Boropolis Podcast. We are back for the second week of the Boropolis Podcast Series 2, of course, the first game of the championship season. Boro are back. We are back. Admittedly, a little bit late because Nathan, as we stated last week in his contract, had to go on holiday, all paid for by Boropolis expenses. So he's been away. But we've got so much to get into. So before we get started, Nathan, how was the holiday?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, it was nice and sunny, and got to watch the Boro game in a dodgy Spanish pub. So lovely.
Always the best on holiday, where everyone's sort of walking past thinking, why are people watching championship football? Do you know what actually I've seen? I think you sent me a video. It seemed to be quite a lot of Middlesbrough fans out there, so I don't know if that's a hot spot, but it did look quite full, to be fair.
Was busy. Boro everywhere.
We're worldwide. We're a massive club. So as we said, really, there's just so much to talk about, isn't there? So off the back of obviously last week's podcast, once the season had started, there was the early rumblings of Marcus Tavernier departing the club. Of course, now he has departed the club. A £12 million move to Bournemouth broke a lot of Middlesbrough fans' hearts, but it's done now, Nathan. It's been confirmed, of course. Firstly, I made my feelings quite clear about it last week, but now it's confirmed and it's done. How are you feeling about the whole thing?
Yeah, I think I'm already sort of past the stage of being a bit upset by it all. I think it's a good move for him. He gets to play in the Premier League. He gets that contract. And I've sort of heard rumblings that the contract was just too good to turn down, which is fair enough. It's a short business, is football. A footballer's career is only short. And I suppose at the end of the day, they have to make money. And there you go.
Yeah, I feel like we did go into it a little bit last week. So, of course, a few people have changed their opinions since it was announced, and, that early sort of denial and a little bit of bitterness is probably gone. Of course, when the move was about to be confirmed, we got some reports from the Gazette, who, are always going to be sort of spot on with these types of things. They're the people that, are closest to the club, being a local paper, and they made the case, and Chris Wilder then later confirmed it, that Tavernier was offered a new contract. I think force the move is probably the wrong way to phrase it, but he certainly wanted to move. He was all to do it, and I think ultimately that was the reason why it went through in the end. So I think just in terms of, Marcus Tavernier as a person, as a player, I wish him all the best. I know I joked last week about interviewing him. First Middlesbrough player I ever interviewed, and he's left. So hopefully we don't get any of our fan favourites on the podcast this season, because it could be a real tricky January if that's the case. But yeah, I wish him all the best. I think, judging by reports, he's going to be used as a left wing back, which is certainly questionable. But now the sort of dust settled a little bit, I think, we're both ready to move on. And I think most people, having sat back now, probably just wish him the best. And that's done. Now on to a bit more positive news, Nathan. You went on about how excited you were by the prospect of this. And no, I'm not talking about any sort of foreign striker or exciting link. I'm talking about a free agent by the name of Tommy Smith being confirmed. It's done, Nathan. How happy are you by this news?
I just love signings like that. Signings of like experienced pros in the championship that have been around the block, and they come and sign for you on a 1-year contract as a stopgap. The number 14 shirt at Middlesbrough is earning itself a massive reputation for world-class players to don that shirt. You look at Martin Craney, Lee Peltier, now Tommy Smith. So some big players donning that shirt.
Yeah, there certainly has been. And let's also take this moment to remember Martin Craney's performance at Burton Albion away. Of course, I'm only joking. It was a horrific 45 minutes, I think, is what he lasted, actually. It might have been 60. It can't have been much more than that. But yes, more sort of forward news as well. Of course, we spoke about it ever so briefly, really, because the links were quite early at that stage. But of course, since the release of that podcast, confirmed, everything's done. Of course, he made his debut on Saturday. Marcus Force in from Brentford, 3 million fee suggested and reported. You know, we briefly covered that as well last week, but obviously now it's done. How are you feeling about that one?
Yeah, it all looks good. A forward that's been in the Championship before, had that bit of experience and signed on a 4-year deal. So it looks as though the club are willing to invest some time into the player, develop him, and hopefully sell him on for a profit, which, as I touched on last week, is the type of model that we should be looking at. We're the type of club at this moment in time that should be trying to do that, sign players that have plenty of potential, look to develop them and sell them on for a larger fee. So hopefully Force gets some opportunities into this side. I'm sure he will, with this current state of play with our forwards. But yeah, it looks like a promising signing for the future as well as the present.
Yeah, I think actually, you know, since what you said, of course, about getting players in of an age where they can develop, or certainly in terms of ability wise, you know, signings that really could go on and earn us some money later down the line. And you know, it's sometimes football fans might not like that outlook on things, but I think in the position that we're in, and of course the addition of Kieran Scott last year, it certainly, you know, almost hinted towards the fact that that was going to be the new way of going about things. You know, not spending alarmingly large amounts of money on pretty average players and then having to ship them out 2 years later because a different manager had come in and wanted a completely different style. So yeah, again, echoing what you said, you know, Force fits that category. He's a permanent signing. You know, we're not developing someone else's player, which I think is important as well. And yeah, although I don't think he's going to be first choice when the transfer window ends, definitely a good option to have. And you know, it's always nice to see a player that departs their previous team's fans, giving them a good send-off, and that's always a good sign. And Brentford fans certainly did do that. So, Nathan, on to the action of the week. Saturday, not Blackburn Rovers, despite what the initial tweet on the Boropolis account said last week. We weren't previewing a Blackburn game. We were previewing a West Brom game. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. I think it was just the excitement of the season kicking in and making me a little bit delirious. But as we always do, Nathan, let's talk about the team lineups to start with. How did you feel when that team sheet come out at 4:30? It would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think there was only really, in fact, maybe 2 surprises. The first one being Bowler keeping his place instead of Fry being in that side. Chris Wilder did say the previous week when we played Marseille that Dale Fry was rested from that squad. But had it been a competitive game, he would have been starting no problem. So a bit of a shock that Fry wasn't in that starting 11, but Border did put in a good performance against Marseille, so you can see why he retained his place. And then the other, suppose, slight shock was Tuber up front, rather than anyone else, perhaps a Josh Coburn, who we saw a lot more of last year. But Tuber, more experienced, and evidently is beginning to impress Chris Wilder a little bit, which, there you go. you may be pulling me on board the Chuback train. So
yeah, well, I mean, we joked about it last week. Towards the end of the podcast last week, well, I think our heads were starting to go a little bit. We were almost not joking, but the thought of Chuback Pom making a return, that huge redemption arc of being told that he was not in the plans whatsoever, and then all of a sudden starting the first game of the season just seemed like it could never happen, but it did. And in fairness to him, obviously we'll get into the actual action of the game, showed some good signs, we'll say that. So getting into the actual talking points of the game, first opening really comes from a poor kick from Zach Steffen. We spoke about his distribution, and ironically, I felt it was quite poor against West Brom. A lot of his passes, long-range passes, made the way into the front row of, either stand that he was aiming for the wing of. But, I think probably even though he's a Manchester City goalkeeper, with a little bit of nerves, a little bit of rustiness, it's to be expected, to be honest. But as I say, the first chance of the game come from that. He attempts to pick one out towards Ryan Giles, and it's intercepted by West Brom. And then the absolute veteran of the Championship, that is Jed Wallace, attempts an absolutely audacious effort and nearly lobs him from what's got to be probably 40 yards out. And in fairness to Steffen, he recovers incredibly and tips it onto the bar and over the bar.
he does. I think if you looked at us last year and Joe Lumley misplaces that pass, I don't think Joe Lumley recovers and makes that save, in all fairness. So despite the error, it's good that the recovery was there. A good save keeps us in it early on. I felt that West Brom were sort of dominated in the early stages, perhaps the first 10 minutes. They had a lot of the ball, not really doing much with it, like just sort of just passing it around the back four, and just keeping possession. But yeah, kept us in it early on.
Yeah, he certainly did. And of course, that save meant that the game remained 0-0. And of course, it gave Middlesbrough the opportunity to take the lead in the game, which comes from what I think is going to be an absolutely frightening duo for Championship defences all season, and probably some Premier League sides if we get foreign competitions, because I think these two could cause problems for just about anyone. Johnny Howson picks up a loose pass in midfield, spreads it out wide to Ryan Giles, and we really see what he's excellent at and is going to be excellent at. Bombs forward, breaks down the left-hand side, cuts the ball into the box for Chuba Akpom, who I must say does well to, keep his line, his movement to pull away from the West Brom defender. It makes its way to Chuba, who cuts it back, and the other wing back that everyone's terrified of, Isaiah Jones, is there to put the ball into the back of the net. And 1-0, amazing just to be. It's that first goal at home every season when the season returns is always special, and it was a good atmosphere even before the game, but that really got the place bouncing, and ultimately a really well worked goal, actually.
Yeah, it was a really well worked goal. Just special mention to Johnny Howson, just all over the place again on Saturday afternoon. And that's where he picked up the ball, picked up that loose pass from West Brom, fired it into Giles, as you say, saw a bit of what he's about, driving inside, flicks it back outside to Chuba. In all fairness, it's a fantastic ball in from Chuba. I thought he was initially aiming for Watmore, but then it turns out that the cross didn't actually take a deflection off the West Brom defender. It just went straight through to Jones, and it was pretty standard finish, wasn't it? Open net, David Button had gambled. And yeah, it was lift off. And from then on, really, Boro could have doubled or trebled the lead.
Yeah, of course, the sort of age-old story of watching Middlesbrough that, we can never really put games to bed. And I think the chance that we're about to talk about had a Rodrigo Muniz or a certain player of the Eredivisie, who we'll talk about in a little bit, being on the end of a Ryan Giles fizzed across the face of the West Bromwich Albion 6-yard box. It probably would have been 2-0 Middlesbrough. Instead, of course, the cross I'm talking about from Ryan Giles fizzed across the box. Duncan Watmore's there, and without sounding too critical, it's becoming all too common that Duncan Watmore has these misses in his locker. We saw again Stoke away where the ball was squared to him and it was over the bar. There was a miss against Barnsley last season where Piero, unmarked, rolls the ball across to Watmore and he misses. And it's a strange one with Duncan Watmore because he tends to actually fire away the more difficult chances, but actually miss the easier chances, and that was the case with that chance, Nathan. It was agonising to watch, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and I think really what he's got wrong is which part of the boot he's actually trying to prod the ball home with. He's sort of gone with his toes to try and flick it into that far corner with like a deft touch. But all he needed was that side foot just to prod it forward, and it's in. David Button's not going to save it. So, yeah, again, it's becoming all too just continuous with these Duncan Watmore misses. As you say, he scores the more difficult ones, which is quite funny, actually. I mean, you look at his goal against Huddersfield last year, the lob. You look at the goal against Sheffield United last year at home, where he sort of just picks out the top corner with his left foot from an almost impossible angle. And then he misses those ones that you've just mentioned there, Stoke, Barnsley, and then Saturday. So you can see why Chris Wilder wants to improve the front line, because forwards in the Championship shouldn't be missing chances like that.
Yeah. From that point onwards, really, in the first half, I think we controlled all the way up until that half-time whistle. And although probably, and I think it would have been extremely difficult to do so, we didn't create a chance as good as that Watmore chance. I felt we were still in control. I was fully expecting us to come out in the second half and put and just he's back. We can carry on. Nathan, I don't know if you could hear what I was saying. You could probably, if anyone's watching on YouTube, you could probably see the scared look in my eyes that, oh no, he's gone. We're going to have to start recording again. But what I was saying, just continuing, I think Steve Bruce probably gave his West Brom side a little bit of a rocket up the backside, got them up for the second half, and it was a little bit of a different game second half, wasn't it? They come out and find the equaliser, and it wasn't a great goal from our perspective, was it?
No, it wasn't. Really, I think we just sort of overcommitted a little bit. It all started really with Duncan Watmore losing the ball on the edge of West Brom's box, and the ball got cleared towards their front man. I think it was Grant in this case, and Darrell Lenihan wins the first header and then overcommits, pulls himself out of position, looks to press Jason Malumbi in West Brom's midfield, and Malumbi fires a ball down the line, and the pace of West Brom's forwards get the better of us. Jed Wallace striding forward, as you say, a championship veteran, scored loads of goals for Millwall, sets loads up as well. And yeah, there's men breaking forward. The Boro backline sort of gambles with the men that are a bit further forward, and John Swift is in absolutely acres of space, just hanging out. And yeah, Jed Wallace cuts it back. Swift sweeps it into the corner, and it's 1-1. Game on early on in the second half, and it had me panicking beyond belief.
Yeah, it was. It completely changed the face of the game, didn't it? And it's to be expected, of course. Although West Brom have been criticised for their style over the years, and Steve Bruce is, let's put it this way, that he's not the most known for his fast flowing, possession-based style as a manager. But, we spoke about it in the preview. The West Brom have got players that can hurt you if you want completely on your game. You look at their bench compared to ours, and it's just, it's almost worlds apart, really. And as you say, it had me on the edge of my seat. It had me scared, I can't lie. Some of the substitutions that they brought onto the pitch, Daryl DK, they must have paid 15-16 million pound for him, and he's not even starting games. I know he's had a couple of injury problems, but you kind of think, well, what would the game have ended up like had we have had Daryl DK to bring off the bench? But of course that's not the case. West Brom had a few really good chances to probably take the lead and win the game. One springs to mind where Wallace goes through again, and I think it's Carlin Grant waiting just to have the ball squared to him. And, I don't really know what he's trying to do. I think he sort of is crossed in the mind of whether to square it or try and go for the shot with his left foot. In the end, he sort of does neither, and Stefan gathers the ball. There was a few times where Stefan also come out and made himself big and stopped sort of cross shots and managed to get the ball out of danger. But in the end, to be honest, on the balance of things, I think it was probably a fair result.
Yeah, it was. And before the game, I would have happily taken a point with the current state of play, with Boro's starting 11, with two forwards there that Chris Wilder probably wants to improve upon massively, with losing Tav in the week, and McGree, who was always said to be playing in the number 10 leading up to the week, now playing in the 8 where Tavernier would play. It just seemed as though things could have been better, and Boro could have possibly been better equipped going into this game than we were. But a point against a side that holds some of the top players in this division, has strength in depth, and strength in depth to the point of a lot of their strength in depth, looking at OK Yakuslu, wasn't even in their squad on Saturday afternoon. So happy with the point, and with a week before the next game against QPR, was hoping for a few more bodies in the door, as was the manager, Chris Wilder.
Yeah, he certainly was, wasn't he? He got everyone after. I don't think a disappointing result would be the right way to say it, but a lot of fans probably would have hoped that we'd replicate our first half performance in the second and go on and get the win. Of course, that wasn't the case, but it was a positive post-match press conference from Wilder. I think a lot of it was dominated, of course, by transfers. And he come out and said that he still wants 5 players through the door. There's been speculation from almost everyone, all Middlesbrough fans all summer, as to how many we actually do need. And that was before the exits of Tavernier and Piero and the likes of those two. So post-match, Wilder was quoted saying, we weren't for having another couple in today, of course, meaning on Saturday, and then said we're pretty close on a few. Up to this point, those couple that we thought would probably have been confirmed by now, of course, we're recording this later in the week as we usually would, but there's been no sort of confirmation or until probably about half an hour before we started recording any real concrete reports to suggest that we're, even closing in on anyone. But of course, we'll get on to some of the names mentioned. But did you expect by this stage of the week, of course, we're recording this on Wednesday night. So whenever time you listen, there may have been an update or some confirmation since then. Did you expect by now we'd have maybe one or two confirmations?
I did, yeah. Wilder just sounded very confident in that press conference post West Brom about the signings coming in the door. I think the fact that he said a couple are very close and they could have even been in by Saturday indicates just how close they were to being done. And the fact that we're now very nearly approaching Saturday and there's still nothing done. Doesn't look too great, does it?
No, it doesn't. But of course, the way that the transfer window works, there can be a whole lot of hysteria and excitement before anything's actually even confirmed. So we'll start with our favourite Brazilian since Juninho. Of course, that is an absolute joke. There's other Brazilians, and this certain Brazilian may not even join. But one thing that he does love doing is liking, sharing, trolling, and overall just having our Twitter account on strings, to be honest, Nathan. Of course, I'm talking about Rodrigo Muniz. I think it would take until probably next Wednesday to actually go through the amount of things that he's liked to do with Middlesbrough or retweeted. But I think he's having a great time at the moment, isn't he? Because he knows how much hysteria it causes. It doesn't really affect him. He must find it hilarious, to be honest.
Yeah, he must do. Yeah, he's a player that I think would definitely improve our forward line. And he's probably seen what Boro Twitter is like last year, where he was linked to come here and instead opted for Fulham, and has probably thought, yeah, I'll have a bit of fun and just try and get as many bites as he possibly can. And yeah, I think he's probably living a bit more in your head than he is mine, Chris.
Yeah, he is. He is. I can't lie. He's. Well, I think we shared a bit of a joke. That old Mel Morris meme of him having people on strings, having clubs on strings. I mean, that didn't exactly pan out very well. We're hoping that Rodrigo Muniz one might pan out a little bit better. But, it's got to the stage now where people actually look at his likes, will then tag us in the comments saying, have a look. The little eyes emoji, just, check that out. And more often than not, it's a new tweet. I think the more sort of, ballsy, for more of a better word, would be the one saying, there's the slot in the forward line here at Middlesbrough for you, Rodrigo, and he's like that. And he's also retweeted a video of him scoring against Stoke. Quite a normal thing to do. Oh no, it's actually got pig bag edited over the top of it. So, the reports from Alan Nixon a few weeks ago now were that should Fulham bring in another front man, that loan move will be sanctioned. So, judging by his social media activity, I'd say that this is probably already agreed. And actually, it's just a case of waiting for Fulham. But, as Wilder has said, it's a difficult market, and we don't know when Fulham will go and find a replacement for Rodrigo Muniz. So he's been having his fun, but that's him covered. One name that we were linked with earlier in the summer, and who actually, it was confirmed by people high up at Hull City that we'd had an approach rejected. Jacob Greaves, a left-sided centre-back. That link has cropped up again this week, a bid rejected in excess of £5 million. And although that's been rejected, it's clear that Hull have a valuation of Greaves, but Greaves is in a similar situation to Marcus Tavernier, where I believe he's approaching the final year of his contract and he still hasn't signed a new contract. So, there's a bit of a sort of balance scales here as to what Hull should do, what they might want to do, and, financially for them, what would be the best decision. I think we all agree that it would be a fantastic signing, but, it remains to be seen whether that will happen. I think given the player sales and the money that we've brought in, I wouldn't be surprised at another approach. But just touching on, what a signing Jacob Greaves would be, Nathan, he would fit that left-sided centre-half role perfectly in Chris Wilder's system, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would. And I think he does fit into that sort of mould of player that Chris Wilder will be looking for, in terms of he's a ball-playing centre-half. He would provide us with that balance on the left-hand side of defence. But he also fits the sort of transfer model that we look to be going down. He's only 21, 22-year-old.
Yeah.
So he fits that model. He's thought of very highly at Hull City, and you can see why, with their academy, developing players and bringing them through and providing them with the opportunities in the first team. We saw it with Keane Lewis-Potter, and of course he was sold for a massive fee this summer as well. So perhaps that's sort of a part of their thinking, as to why they don't want to let Greaves go, because they've already had a massive influx of cash this summer already with losing Keane Lewis-Potter. So yeah, they do want to keep Greaves. Apparently they are in sort of talks with him to extend that contract. As you say, he's going at the final year, but I'm not sure whether Hull have an option to extend that for another year on top of that. So yeah, although Hull would like to keep him, you don't know what Greaves' ambitions are as of yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay at Hull, because I think his dad's a legend there as well. And of course, coming through the academy, with their takeover as well this year, it looks like they want to push on into the top half at least. But yeah, I think had we been a Premier League Bournemouth, we'd have quite easily been able to prize him away from Hull City.
Yeah, and that sentence from you there really hurt, I can't lie. But let's not dwell on it, because we've got exciting striker transfer news, updates, all sorts. I mean, ironically, again, at the time of recording, we're fresh off the back of probably one of the most lively nights of the transfer window so far this year. But firstly, we'll talk about another striker, Matthew Hoppy, and I thought it was Hope, but I believe it actually is pronounced Matthew Hoppy. An American international, currently at Mallorca, went there from Schalke towards the back end of last week, reports from The Athletic, which of course is, a highly, highly respected source, that was getting quite advanced. Since then there's been more reports that we're struggling to close a deal for him. Again, that was rumoured to be a permanent move and one that would cost, something similar to the fee that we've used for Marcus Force. Firstly, I think what everyone does when you link with a striker is go to his goal record, and to be brutally honest, it's not great. But in the same breath, Teemu Pukki's record prior to joining Norwich was not great either, and look what he's become. And I think this type of signing is the real sort of indication as to the type of signings that Kieran Scott wants to make for this football club. Sort of smaller priced gambles that could become, something, of course, which they believe is a much higher value later on down the line. And, it's not a name that'll get people massively excited, but it's fairly low risk, high reward potentially. So Nathan, with that in mind, is this a signing that you would be open to?
I suppose I don't want to say no, but if he was coming in to this side in its current state, yes, but with the other names that we've been linked with in the forward department, absolutely not, really. There's other forwards that I'd love to prioritise. Of course, as you say, for centre forwards, you look at the goal record, it's not great. It's something like 6 in 30, which isn't too good, but low risk, possibly high reward. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's the best way, really.
Excuse me.
And bless you, Nathan. I think that's the best way to put it, really. As we say, it's a difficult one because, I think that sometimes, people, of course, look at these records and think, well, if he's not done anything up until this moment, then, he's not going to do anything after that. But we've seen with, some little golden nuggets that the likes of Norwich have found that they can completely transform their careers, really. But then also, I think we should be honest with it. We don't, I think we're probably two fans, we speak an awful lot, that don't sort of tend to rely heavily on, looking too in depth into pie charts and, stats. And by all means, there's very good people out there that can compile stats. And, that's the exact reason why me and Nathan aren't working as analysts or in the recruitment team at football clubs. But from a fan perspective, I don't think it should be, you should have your nose turned up at you if you aren't that impressed with, a striker with that sort of goal record. But, you have to be open to these things as well. It is a difficult balance, because I think anyone would be lying if they looked at Matthew Hoppy's goal record and thought that's going to be a great signing. But then also, there's a reason why Kieran Scott is targeting players like that. And, we can all agree now that I'd rather trust Kieran Scott's judgment than my own or Nathan's. And no offence to you, Nathan, but yeah, I think you summed it up quite well there with what you said. Moving on to, of course, the man that has sent Middlesbrough Twitter into meltdown over the past 24 to 48 hours. It started off as a link that, to be honest, initially we didn't cover. And I said this on Twitter, it come from a source. And we spoke, just quickly to touch on this, we spoke last week about, of course, because we share news from a range of different sources, we don't want to confuse or conflict information. But with the nature of the transfer window, there's always going to be, from different sources, different news and conflicting information. So it's a difficult one with that. But the initial account it come out from, I think, had less than 1,000 followers. But in all fairness, I'll hold my hands up. It's proven to, over the last sort of few days, become sort of, public knowledge that actually we do want this player, and we've made multiple bids for this player. Of course, this player is Jorgen Strand Larsen of FC Groningen in the Eredivisie. This one's got you excited, hasn't it, Nathan?
Yeah, it really has. It's one of them where I just looked at the build of the player, the way that he sort of holds himself in the clips that I've seen, looked towards his key attributes and assessed whether or not he would be a massive success in this Chris Wilder side, with Isaiah Jones and Ryan Giles passing him the ball from the wings. And I'm convinced that he's breaking Mitrovic's record last year if he signs. No, I'm only joking, of course. But yeah, the clips that I've seen of him prove that he can score all types of goals, whether that be shots from distance or just being in and around that 6 to 8 yards out from goal in that poacher area and just finishing easy chances like we saw Duncan Watmore miss on Saturday. Yeah, it looked like the link was a bit iffy, as you said there, with that account being first towards it with less than 1,000 followers, and in the bio saying that anyone can send a rumour in. But it appears to be true, and it's been spoken from the horse's mouth at FC Groningen, so it must be true. So yeah, I'd be very, very excited with this one.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the stature of the player. Physically, I think he's 6'4". I believe he might even be taller than that. And as you say, we don't want to get into the whole sort of judging a player off a YouTube video, which is easily done. We've all done it. I think we'd all hold our hands up and say so. But from tonight's updates, as you say, from the horse's mouth, the technical director of his club has come out and said that Middlesbrough have had 2 bids rejected for Larsen. Bologna and Italy have also had 2 bids rejected, but Middlesbrough's bids are to a higher value than what Bologna's are currently. They want to keep Larsen. However, they have also said if it reached top price, that they would pretty much be willing to say goodbye to him. Actually, quite a similar situation to Marcus Tavernier. So, Nathan, how are you feeling after that bizarre sort of YouTube video? I couldn't really see Kieran Scott or Neil Bowser doing something like that.
No, neither could I, but it looks like a lovely PR exercise. And should it be a PR exercise, and Groningen have sort of confided themselves to losing Larsen, then I would be massively pleased. Yeah, they said that Boro have bid higher than Bologna, which is a bonus, considering they're playing the top flight in Italy. But yeah,
I think we should also say that obviously the fees being reported are close to the 10 million euro mark. So that's roughly about 9.4, 9.5 million. So, this isn't a Matthew Hoppy type of signing. This is a player that will probably, should he arrive, get the number 9. And, all of our hopes will sort of be pinned on this player. And, whether that's a good or a bad thing, that's up to a lot of different people to make up their minds about. But certainly the fee would indicate that should he sign, Larson will be the main man. And as you say, the whole sort of PR aspect to it kind of makes you think that, they may be sort of just letting their fans know that there is a possibility he could go. But don't worry, because if he does go, it'll be a great deal for the football club, which, of course, we all know what that can mean at times.
Yeah, it pretty much can mean we've done all we can, which was very similar to what I think Middlesbrough have done with saying that we offered Tavernier a new contract. It'll be nowhere near what Bournemouth have offered him and what he's got at Bournemouth now. But it gives the club the opportunity to come out and say, oh, look, we've done all we can to try and make him stay. He turned our offer down and he wanted to go and play in the Premier League, which is fine. It is just a way of the club keeping fans on side. And if Groningen have done that, then us over here at Middlesbrough, if we are said to be in pole position, like it looks like, as the club that have bid highest for him, then we'll all be over the moon. He looks like a top player. Obviously, only 22 years old, plenty of time to develop, plenty of potential there. It's evident to see what type of player he is through the clips that are there. But yeah, he sort of looks in that similar build to, I mean, I'm by no means comparing him to how good this other player is, but he sort of reminds me of Haaland in that sense of the quite broad in their build.
The height's there as well.
The height's there as well, of course. The Norwegian, yeah, okay, they're both Norwegian, but just the type of finishes as well. They just look very, very similar.
Yeah, there's a variety of finishes, isn't there? It's not just purely headed goals or purely, right-footed goals. There's one-on-ones, there's headers, there's aerial duels. Even in some of the highlights that you watch, it's not just his goals, it's his ability to link play up. It's his ability to, be the front man that I don't think we've, from my memory, really ever had, to be honest. That real pinpoint, that real sort of talisman at the top of the pitch, and it would certainly, be a very exciting happen if that is to happen.
Yeah, it will be. He's captured my imagination.
I think that's a great way of putting it, actually, Nathan.
Yeah, he's captured my imagination as Boro's number 9. And yeah, the YouTube clips have done me again. I just hope this doesn't end in heartbreak.
It certainly has all the potential to end in heartbreak, doesn't it? Just a few more updates before we move on to previewing that QPR game on Saturday. There was a sort of brief link that come out late last week, around about the same time that Tavernier was leaving, Hannibal Medjugorje from Manchester United, on loan. There was completely wrong and falsely made up reports that somehow sneaked onto social media that we were in advanced talks with Medjugorje, and that's just not the case at all. No sources reported that. But in terms of what he could offer, probably a lot of yellow cards, Nathan, because everything I've seen of him, he just likes kicking people But what's just interesting, just quickly touching on it as well, is that when Wilder's spoken about Tavernier leaving, he hasn't spoken about Riley McGree being his direct replacement, and he said that we would need to replace Tavernier. So that to me suggests that, okay, Riley McGree may, well, I think he's going to, isn't he? He's going to be that left-sided number 8. But it may be, a player that's not just going to be and no disrespect I mean by this, it's not going to be a Caelan Boyd-Munt who comes in and everyone knows he's not going to play. It could be, someone with more appearances and a more established player in that position.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Although I do think Wilder is saying that we need to replace Tavernier almost to say to Riley McGree, that's not your spot as a given. You do have to earn that spot. Riley McGree is Chris Wilder's player. He was brought into the football club by Chris Wilder. I do think that Wilder picked up on that number 8 position on the left side of midfield as a possible weakness, hence why he improved upon it. Maybe he knew that Tavernier would be pushing for a move in the summer, hence why McGree was brought in almost as a ready-made player to fit into that role. But yeah, I think now if you look at the side, you identify a left-sided centre-half, probably 2 central midfielders that can play on either side to fill Piero's void and the void left by Tavernier as well. I mean, I myself would probably look at someone to sit in defensive midfield as well. Johnny Howson's probably not going to be able to play 46 games this season. And then, of course, the forwards, which you'd probably think 2 absolute minimum for the centre forward positions, and that's without the possibility of anyone leaving. You look at Chuba Akpom and Duncan Watmore and Josh Coburn, who has been mentioned that he's possibly going to be going out on loan. So 3 centre forwards there at the club that were there last year, all possibly maybe leaving. Only Marcus Force, I'd say, is nailed on to be here come the end of the window. All of them could leave. But yeah, 5 is the number that Chris Wilder said on Saturday, and we've seen 0 so far. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Reason to be optimistic, of course. I'm sure over the next 2 days we'll get some more updates on all those situations, and be sure to check out our Twitter if you haven't already, and stay up to date with all that, because we'll try our best, even though it's verging on impossible at times because there's that much stuff happening at the moment, but we'll do our best. So just to finish up, Nathan, before we wrap up this episode, of course, put all of the transfer rumours and all that exciting stuff to one side. There is actually a football match and a championship game at that happening on Saturday. Of course, we travel to QPR. One thing's for sure, Joe Lumley has no chance of passing the ball straight to a striker. For sure. So that is something to be thankful for. I think we all know, and throughout the years, it's only really got tougher. QPR is never, ever an easy place to go to. Last season, arguably, we actually should have won. But of course, we had a certain Joe Lumley in goal, which is never, the easiest thing to win a football match with. Or person, I should say. He's not a thing. That's a little bit too. But yeah, they've got threats. Lyndon Dykes. A little bit of Boropolis Podcast trivia for you. My brother used to live with him. and has his phone number still. So if he does score, I'll be sure to message him off my brother's phone and send him some horrible abuse. No, of course I don't condone abuse like that. But yeah, I'm sort of waffling about Lyndon Dykes. He's probably not actually the biggest threat. They've got plenty, Nathan. What do you expect from the game and the people that are going to cause us problems?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a different QPR to what we've seen over recent years, and that's because of a managerial change over the summer. Mark Warburton left the club and was replaced by Stephen Gerrard's assistant at both Rangers and Aston Villa, Michael Beale. A bit of an unknown quantity as a manager, but as a coach, he's received high plaudits from many. So taking his first managerial role, as I say, unknown quantity at QPR. Loftus Road, difficult place to go. Over the years, it's been hit and miss. We never really know what we're going to get when we go there. In terms of a result, it's not a happy hunting ground, but it's not the worst ground in the world for us. In terms of QPR and their first game of the season, they got beat 1-0 at Ewood Park against Blackburn. An unbelievable goal in all fairness. Travis just launched one in the top corner from 30 yards. But something that will jinx the game that I'm going to throw out there is QPR didn't have a shot on target on Saturday. So 4-0 next week. We'll enjoy that podcast. But yeah, the usual threats. Ilias Chair is the main one that always worries me. He's just a magician, I think, really. Can go either way when he's got the ball at his feet, can jink left and go right, can go right and go left. Yeah, he's got a mean strike on him as well. But Chris Willock is still out as far as I'm aware, although he's not too far away from returning for QPR. But I think Saturday will come a bit too early for him, which is a bonus for us because he is a fantastic player at this level as well. Then lastly, it's the Albert Adoma derby, isn't it? Of course, last year he gave us a point, which was nice of him. Finished a fantastic Isaiah Jones cross. So hopefully we'll have another Albert goal in his own net this Saturday. But yeah, it's another tough game. Tough trip to London. Boro have sold 2,000 tickets already. Outstanding support. Expect nothing less, really. Yeah, I think that's about everything with QPR. A difficult game. Hopefully we'll have some more signings in the door. Hopefully our forward bags one. Whoever that may be.
Yeah, you really just don't know at this point in time because it could be a new signing. It could be it might not be the player that you think it is because pretty much, as you say, apart from Marcus Force, the role could be out the door by the time that we play QPR. Just as a little bit of a funny one for people that may be listening on audio, I pulled a terrified face when Nathan mentioned that stat about no shots on target from QPR. So rest assured, if he does jinx it, then we can all be nasty to him next week and blame it on him. But yeah, I think that's it from us. Plenty going on at the moment. As I say, make sure to check out our Twitter for all that sort of stuff. What I didn't say last week, and a shameless plug, we love one at the end of the podcast, Nathan. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us, leave nice reviews on all audio platforms. And just to thank you from the both of us as well, because the first episode back got a lot of nice feedback and people listening and watching. So I'll stop talking, Nathan. we won't be making any predictions for the QPR game as we don't want to curse it too much. But from the two of us, that has been the Boropolis Podcast, and we'll see you again next week.